A cold remark from a receptionist brought down an entire financial empire within a single week. On a crisp Monday morning, the glass doors of Eastridge Capital's Manhattan headquarters slid open to reveal a woman in her early 40s, dressed in a sleek charcoal coat, understated pearl studs, and low heels that clicked softly on the marble floor. Her name was Imani Blake, an enigmatic black CEO and founder of BlakeVest Technologies, a multi-billion-dollar AI powerhouse. With no entourage, no fanfare, she walked in quietly, prepared for a strategic meeting that could change the course of the industry. But before she could even reach the front desk, the receptionist Cameron glanced at her dark skin, modest appearance, and assumed the worst. With a smug smile, she sneered, "This isn't where you drop off job applications. Get lost." A senior executive standing nearby recognized Imani instantly, but said nothing, frozen by fear and ambition. Imani said nothing either. She simply pulled out her phone, dialed a single number, and uttered 6 words with chilling calm. "Activate Plan D. We're done here." Imani Blake, a 43-year-old black entrepreneur and founder of BlakeVest Technologies, had long earned a reputation in the financial tech industry as a visionary leader who rarely appeared in public but held enormous sway in boardrooms from Wall Street to Silicon Valley. Her company, valued at over $8.5 billion, had recently been considering a partnership with Eastridge Capital, a once prestigious investment firm now facing a slow but undeniable decline. For Eastridge, this deal was more than business. It was survival. Internally, the company had been plagued by stagnation, a shrinking client base, and whispers of toxic leadership. Yet on the surface, its gleaming skyscraper and polished PR campaigns continued to sell the illusion of control. What Eastridge didn't know, however, was that the woman they had just dismissed from their lobby, without so much as asking her name, was the very key to their revival. Cameron, the young white receptionist with a sharp bob haircut and a sharper tongue, operated like a gatekeeper of status. She had no clue who Imani was, nor did she care. What she saw was a black woman walking in without a blazer or a briefcase, and she made a snap judgment. Not important, not welcome. Her dismissive attitude wasn't just personal, it was systemic. Behind her desk, she had internalized and embodied the corporate culture she'd absorbed, one that equated power with whiteness, prestige with appearance, and worth with logos. Alex Jordan, the firm's ambitious vice president, stood at a distance during the encounter. He knew exactly who Imani was. He had seen her speak at tech conferences, had followed BlakeVest's expansion into predictive finance, and was even the one who originally pitched the idea of a partnership to the board. But in that moment, as he watched Cameron insult and remove a woman whose signature alone could save the company, Alex made a choice. Not to lead, but to stay silent. His eyes flicked to the security cameras. He knew the footage would capture everything, but he also knew that power in his world didn't always reward courage. It often rewarded complicity. And so he folded his arms, turned slightly away, and let the damage unfold. This was where the conflict was born, not in a boardroom or during a negotiation, but right there in the lobby, in the space between assumption and arrogance, silence and action. Imani, unshaken on the outside but already calculating the fallout, walked out without a word. She didn't need to argue her worth. She had the leverage, the numbers, the reputation, and now a front-row view of how Eastridge treated people when they thought no one important was watching. The irony was brutal. The very firm scrambling for survival had just slammed its doors on the one person who could have saved it. The spark had been lit. The collapse had begun. Cameron's voice rang through the marble lobby with sharp authority. Her lips curled into a smirk as she waved over security, casually declaring, "This woman doesn't belong here. Escort her out." 2 uniformed guards approached without hesitation, grabbing Imani Blake by the arms as if she were a trespasser rather than a billionaire tech executive. Around them, a few employees paused, phones in hand or eyes darting nervously toward the confrontation, but no one intervened. The looks on their faces weren't of surprise, they were of compliance, the kind that grows from a culture where appearance trumps merit. Alex Jordan stood off to the side, arms folded, his face carefully neutral. As the man who had once passionately pitched BlakeVest as Eastridge's salvation, During a desperate leadership retreat, he felt a knot tighten in his chest. He had known Imani would visit. He had even advised the team to expect someone unconventional, someone who didn't flaunt her power. But now, watching her being forcibly removed under false assumptions, he made a silent calculation. Speaking up might jeopardize his own ascent. So he looked away, just slightly, enough to pretend it wasn't happening, enough to let the company make the fatal mistake without putting his name on it. Upstairs, in a high-glass corner office, Eastridge's senior executives gathered in an emergency meeting, unaware that the person they'd just ejected was the key to their future. The firm's quarterly losses had spooked investors, and every analyst knew the BlakeVest deal was their last shot at relevance in a rapidly shifting market. "We need this partnership," the CFO had said just an hour before. "It's either BlakeVest or we start cutting teams by next quarter." Yet no one in that room had the faintest idea that, as they spoke, the CEO of their would-be partner was already stepping into the back seat of a black Escalade outside. Imani didn't slam the door. She didn't curse or cry. Instead, she looked ahead with a piercing calm and picked up her phone. "Laura," she said to her assistant, "terminate all ongoing discussions with Eastridge immediately." There was a pause. "Yes, all of it. And start prepping the announcement with Morganworth. We're going exclusive." The voice on the other end hesitated. "Understood, Ms. Blake. Press release ready by noon." Imani ended the call, leaned back into the leather seat, and exhaled slowly. She hadn't come to Eastridge for revenge or leverage. She had come to offer them a lifeline. But when a company shows you exactly who they are, how they treat someone they believe is powerless, you don't correct them. You walk away and let them face the consequences. Outside the tinted window, the sleek facade of Eastridge Capital blurred behind her. Inside, no one yet realized that the lifeline had just been cut, and the current pulling them under was about to become a tidal wave. The humiliation they thought they inflicted was already ricocheting back with quiet, devastating precision. Within 24 hours, the financial world was rocked by a wave of headlines that sent shockwaves through investment circles. BlakeVest Technologies terminates talks with Eastridge Capital, announces exclusive deal with rival Morgan Field partners. The announcement landed like a thunderclap on Wall Street, and by mid-morning, Eastridge's stock had plunged nearly 18%, triggering automatic sell-offs and freezing several pending investor agreements. On trading floors and in boardrooms across the city, the question wasn't just what happened. It was who let this happen. Inside Eastridge's glass tower, panic rippled from floor to floor. Phones rang off the hook, inboxes flooded with urgent requests from clients asking for reassurances that no one could give. Several of the firm's longtime partners paused contract renewals, citing concerns about leadership stability. Behind closed doors, the CEO, Darren McCall, convened a crisis meeting with his top team, his voice taut and his expression pale. "We were blindsided," he muttered, tossing the morning's print edition of the Wall Street Journal onto the conference table, the headline glaring back at him. "I want names. I want details. Who saw this coming?" When someone in the room mentioned a potential incident at the front desk, Darren immediately summoned Cameron. The receptionist entered with forced confidence, still unaware of the magnitude of what she had done. "Cameron," Darren asked slowly, "did anything unusual happen yesterday morning? Any visitors?" She blinked, confused, then answered with a shrug. "There was some woman who tried to come in without an appointment. I asked her to leave." Darren's jaw clenched. "What was her name?" Cameron looked nervous now. "I don't know. She didn't give it." The room fell into a thick, suffocating silence. Darren turned to his executive assistant. "Pull the security footage, now." Moments later, a grainy video clip played on the screen. There was Imani Blake, poised, patient, standing calmly in the lobby, before Cameron dismissed her with a wave of her hand and summoned security. The room sat frozen as they watched the moment unfold frame by frame. "You told her to get lost?" Darren asked, his voice almost a whisper. "That woman is Imani Blake. She was the deal. She's the CEO of BlakeVest." Cameron's face was drained of all colors. I didn't know," she stammered, but the damage was irreversible. The meeting ended with a command to put together an apology and damage control strategy, though no one was sure where to even begin. Meanwhile, Imani remained silent. She hadn't issued a public statement, hadn't taken to Twitter or called a press conference. Her silence, however, spoke volumes. Across social media, analysts, insiders, and even former Eastridge employees began to speculate openly. Threads emerged titled, "What's really going on at Eastridge? And is this the next culture crisis?" Former interns chimed in with veiled references to microaggressions and toxic work culture. The press began to dig, and while the firm scrambled to put out fires, it became increasingly clear that this wasn't just about a failed deal. It was about a broken culture, a reputation unraveling in real time. Imani had said nothing, but her quiet withdrawal had exposed everything. Days after the fallout began, a leaked security video surfaced online and detonated what little reputation Eastridge Capital had left. The footage showed, in brutal clarity, receptionist Cameron pointing dismissively at Imani Blake while loudly instructing her to leave the premises, her tone sharp, her expression dripping with contempt. The moment Imani turned calmly and walked out, security flanking her on both sides, the clip froze briefly before cutting to black. Someone had added a caption that would go viral within hours. She walked in quietly. They told her to leave. She walked out and took their future with her. The video exploded across social media, racking up millions of views and igniting a firestorm of outrage. Influencers, journalists, and professionals from all industries began reposting it with hashtags like #corporate-bias, #Imani Blake, and #Eastridge Fallout. Even celebrities chimed in, applauding Imani's quiet grace and condemning the company's blatant disrespect. Public pressure mounted fast, and by the next morning, Eastridge's executive board had no choice but to issue a formal public apology. Darren McCall stood stiffly behind a podium during a press conference, visibly shaken as he read from a carefully worded statement acknowledging a grave error in judgment and failings in company culture. But when reporters asked if Eastridge had contacted Imani to reconcile, Darren's hesitant reply, "We've attempted, but Ms. Blake has chosen not to respond," only underscored the firm's powerless position. Imani, ever composed, had said nothing publicly. She didn't need to. The silence had become a symbol, an indictment louder than any press release. Meanwhile, the scandal opened a floodgate. Former employees, interns, and even current staff anonymously shared their experiences online. Stories emerged of qualified candidates of color being passed over, of employees reprimanded for tone rather than performance, of ideas ignored until echoed by someone more palatable. The media began to dig deeper, and within a week, a formal investigation was launched into Eastridge's hiring and promotion practices. The findings were damning. Internal HR reports revealed a consistent pattern of bias favoring white male candidates for leadership roles, while diverse candidates were routinely sidelined or pigeonholed into non-strategic departments. One report even detailed how resumes with ethnic-sounding names were statistically less likely to be passed to hiring managers. The evidence left no room for spin. As the investigation findings were made public, shareholders began to pull out. 2 board members resigned. Legal inquiries were initiated. Amid this internal reckoning, another name came under scrutiny: Alex Jordan. Screenshots of internal emails and time-stamped footage revealed that Alex had been present in the lobby during the incident and had recognized Imani, but chose not to act. Once seen as a rising star and heir apparent to the COO position, Alex now faced a tide of criticism from colleagues and the media alike. He knew and did nothing. One internal Slack message read, "That's not leadership, that's cowardice." Alex attempted damage control, offering a lukewarm statement about regret and misunderstanding, but it only made matters worse. His silence had spoken as loudly as Cameron's insult, and in the eyes of the public, both were complicit. The consequences were swift. Alex's promotion was quietly revoked, his name scrubbed from internal succession plans. The very ladder he had tried to climb by playing it safe had been ripped from under him. In the wake of the scandal, Imani Blake didn't just move on. She built something bigger. Just 3 months after severing ties with Eastridge, she publicly launched the Blake Equity Lab, a $200 million venture initiative focused on accelerating minority-led startups in underserved communities. The announcement came during a widely covered tech conference in Austin, where Imani stood tall before a crowd of entrepreneurs, investors, and reporters, outlining her vision for reshaping the future of finance through inclusion and integrity. "Innovation doesn't belong to the privileged few," she declared. "It belongs to those brave enough to build something despite the odds." Her first major hire was Tanya Rhodes, a brilliant black systems architect who had once worked at Eastridge before being laid off during a strategic reorganization that suspiciously spared less qualified white male colleagues. Tanya, now appointed as the executive director of Blake Equity Lab, stepped onto the stage with quiet determination, ready to lead the next wave of changemakers. The story made headlines again. The woman once dismissed was now empowering the very talent that places like Eastridge had repeatedly overlooked. Meanwhile, BlakeVest Technologies soared to new heights, not just in valuation, but in cultural leadership. Publications like Forbes and Fast Company began to reference it as the gold standard for ethical innovation. Proof that doing business right didn't mean doing it slow. As Imani's empire expanded, the consequences continued to settle over those who had tried to diminish her. Cameron, the receptionist whose one dismissive comment had lit the fuse, found herself effectively blacklisted in the corporate world. Her name, tied so publicly to the viral scandal, appeared on page 1 of every background check and HR whisper network. Every interview ended the same way: polite emails, no callbacks. She bounced from short-term gigs to retail jobs, her once cocky confidence now replaced by anxious silence. Alex Jordan fared little better. Internal audits unearthed multiple instances of ethical lapses, from biased hiring recommendations to questionable bonus allocations. While he wasn't fired outright, he was quietly demoted, stripped of leadership responsibilities, and effectively sidelined within the company. Any future he had once imagined at the executive level was gone. And Eastridge? The firm never recovered. Investors fled, lawsuits piled up, and with its brand in tatters and no major partnerships left to salvage, the company filed for dissolution. In a poetic twist of fate, the Midtown office building where Imani had once been dismissed now bore a new plaque: Blake Equity Lab, East Coast headquarters. The same front desk where Cameron had once waved her away now welcomed young founders of color, many of whom had never stepped foot in such a space before. Imani didn't need to seek revenge, she built redemption into her legacy. What once was a symbol of exclusion was now a hub for empowerment. She hadn't just survived the system, she had rewritten it. On a bright fall morning, hundreds gathered in front of what was once the Eastridge Capital headquarters, now transformed into the East Coast hub of the Blake Equity Lab. The glass doors gleamed with a new logo etched in silver: BlakeVest. As the crowd hushed, Imani Blake took the stage in a tailored navy pantsuit, the very picture of quiet power. Behind her stood the very building from which she'd once been thrown out, now reborn as a sanctuary for innovation and inclusion. Cameras flashed as she spoke into the microphone, her voice calm and unwavering. "I never needed anyone to give me a seat," she said, smiling. "I built my own table, and I left the door open for those who were told they didn't belong." The moment was captured by dozens of news outlets, but it was a single photo that went viral. Imani standing tall, hand resting on the new company seal, with the caption, "She didn't fight to fit in. She built a future that fit her vision." The image was reposted across LinkedIn, Twitter, and business platforms, hailed as a defining symbol of resilience and redefinition in modern corporate America. True discrimination rarely shouts, more often it whispers. It hides behind gut feelings, behind questions of fit, behind decisions disguised as professionalism. What happened to Imani was not an isolated act of bias. It was a reflection of a culture that had grown too comfortable with quiet exclusion. Cameron believed power meant gatekeeping. Alex believed that silence was safe, but neither understood that real leadership is built on principle, not proximity to authority. Imani didn't destroy Eastridge out of vengeance, she simply held up a mirror. The system unraveled under its own weight, revealing every crack it had tried to hide. This was never about a front desk confrontation. It was about how a company measured value, how it treated the unseen, and how deeply its leadership was willing to look the other way. Imani's decision to walk away wasn't passive. It was intentional, strategic, and dignified. Her restraint became her statement, and in doing so, she reminded an entire industry that respect cannot be conditional and talent should never be underestimated. The lesson isn't just for those who watched from the sidelines, it's for every leader who's ever asked what culture really means. Because in the end, values aren't what companies write in handbooks. They're what they tolerate when no one's looking. Imani built something that outlasted revenge. She built a blueprint for accountability, for representation, and for a future where the door isn't just open, it's held wide with purpose. If this story moved you, inspired you, or made you reflect on how power, prejudice, and resilience collide in the real world, don't forget to hit that like button, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe to X Daily Stories for more powerful narratives that challenge the status quo. Every week, we bring you real-life inspired stories of transformation, justice, and redemption. Because the world doesn't just need information, it needs stories that spark change. Subscribe now and be part of a community that believes in integrity, accountability, and the strength of those who rise with grace. See you in the next episode.